And the other driver who made it yesterday at Martinsville was William Byron, another driver in his 20s, like Ryan Blaney, like Christopher Bell. And it was a little bit different for William Byron, though, in terms of Ryan Blaney dominates, wins the race, leaves no doubt. William Byron scores no stage points with a very average car, finishes 13th in what he says is his worst race of the year, and really has to gut this one out, which surprised me, DJ, because he won at Martinsville last year. And I thought, at 30-point lead, he could just roll in, be fine, just qualify well, get some stage points. I thought he'd have this locked up at halfway after stage 2. I wasn't really buying his pessimism because after Homestead, William Byron kind of struck this chord of like, I don't know about that 30-point lead. Obviously, he knew that short tracks were not the team's forte that they were last year and that they were going to struggle. Got kind of compounded by the fact that his helmet blower wasn't blowing air in. So he's under extremely tough conditions. It was a very, very hot day, unseasonably warm day in Martinsville. Talk about this performance by William Byron, because it really was, again, 13th place finish, nothing to write home about, but he really had to tough it out to get it.
Yeah, well, it wasn't anything to write home about. He got lapped on the racetrack in that long run. That certainly wasn't what they needed to find themselves in that position, because it would have gotten even more interesting if a late race caution had to happen and he wasn't the free pass. The guys on NBC telecast were going through all of those scenarios that he is, as hard as it was, and you could see after the race when he was sitting down on the asphalt beside his car, that just how difficult a day this was. I didn't know at that exact time that, and maybe I'd heard it earlier, but I forgot that his helmet blower wasn't working. But I knew that he had complained about the heat inside the car, and that is a tough place anyway. I can think of back to my days of driving there on some hot days that just physically exhausting to you. And it's a long 500 lap race. And when it's not performing, makes it even harder. He may have done an even better job of driving than Ryan Blaney did to win the race. If you look at it in the way of taking an ill handling car, things not working inside the car to help him any at all. And but he gutted it out, and that told me a lot about this young man and what he can do. He's had his best season. We can say that about at least 3 of the 4. We can't say that Larson had his best season, but he had a great season once again. But the other 3 have had just phenomenal seasons for them in their young careers, and shows us that we've got a lot of racing with them coming on. But I was impressed. 13th is not what you want to do. Wasn't what I expected. As you were pointing out, I expected them to, get enough stage points and really not have to be concerned as to what the end of the race might look like going forward yesterday. But they did what they had to do. And every race you can't script it. Yeah, you can put it up there how you want it, but it can't always play out the way that you want it. So I admire this young man for toughing it out. That's so hard inside the car when you're burning up and just waiting to get to the end. I'm sure, they mentioned at one time when there were 30 laps to go, I said, that seems like a short time, but when you're inside of there fighting this car and, you're trying to think about what you need to do and just get yourself to the end, that's a long 30 laps. But I'll assure you they'll be much better when it comes to the championship race this weekend. I expect that. But this is, I realize this isn't technically considered a short track, but every driver will tell you that it drives like a short track, and that's what you have to do. So, but they have one here. They know how to get the job done, and I expect them to be very competitive.
Byron said there was no chance he was getting out of this car, but the last 50 laps, he said he was really feeling it because, as he described it, it was basically like having a hairdryer blowing hot air. His head, and I can't relate to that. While you're trying to make these laps at this really rough and tumble short track, what would that have been like, do you think, if you had to do that? And what's the longest you've stayed in a car where you wanted to get out but knew you had to get to a finish? Can you relate to what William went through?
Yeah, I certainly can. And those helmet blowers, a lot of times, even on hot days, you think that, wow, is this thing really working? Until you turn it, you can turn it off and then realize the difference. But whenever it's just blowing hot air, then, that's just excruciating. And, it makes a hard job so much more difficult. And I try to back in the early 90s, I was actually driving for the Wood Brothers, and it was a July 4th race in Daytona. And the new thing was one of these cool vests that you could wear. And it actually had a hat that you put on and tubes in it that ran through, and the water circulated through there. And the vest had tubes in it also. And about 30 laps into what was the Firecracker 400 at that time, in the middle of the day on Saturday in Daytona, where it was, even though we started in the morning around 11 o'clock, it was still extremely hot. But this thing quit operating. But the worst thing is it wouldn't turn off, and it kept circulating hot water through those, and so I actually received second-degree burns because it took to get to a caution before I could jerk the wires out of the thing to make it stop pumping, but it sat there still on my body the rest of the race. So, I admire William for sticking it out yesterday, knowing, and it's hard. You could see that he was physically sick, and that's what happens when you get overheated. You have the carbon monoxide, which is prevalent, especially on the short tracks where that air is just there. It never goes away. And so you just get a feeling like you want to literally throw up. And you could see that's I think William after the race would be like, hey, if you'll turn these cameras off, I'll turn over here and throw up, and maybe I'll feel better. But you can see him really struggling to get through that. But, that just shows that it goes to show you what athletes and drivers in this sport will put themselves through to make it happen, and how much it means to you. That was a whole body of work through an entire year of his best year that was facing him. He could not get out of the car, and you have to really dig deep. And so many of us have gone through situations like that. And if William Byron goes on to win this championship this weekend, he'll always look back at that day at Martinsville. And yes, it wasn't anything to brag about with a 13th place finish, but he knows what he had to do as a competitor to make it through and just get to the end of that to where he could be a part of the championship four.
Yeah, he showed a ton of fortitude and certainly very deserving of being in the championship four field.
Hi, I'm Parker Kligerman. For more access like this from Pit Road, be sure to click and subscribe to the Motorsports on NBC YouTube channel.